I actually don't think women should be forced to conscript.
Well, see, that's
I don't think they should. I don't think they should be drafted either.
Yeah, because they have that right from God to not be drafted.
Because we're women, right?
Yeah, that's your right.
Think of it from a logical standpoint. Okay, let's think of the logic here. Women are who are going to birth the future generations to keep your nation going stronger. Correct?
Yeah.
So if you send a bunch of your women out to war to die, you are going to severely impact your population numbers in your nation, because if you could have fewer men essentially and more women, and you can still balance your population.
Let me come in really quick. Well, okay.
Big hole in this line of argumentation.
Okay, so that's one argument. The other argument is that because women are physically not as strong, because women menstruate, because women carry pregnancies, I think that those are reasons why I don't think that it would be beneficial to have them in military service. I think it's probably going to be more of a burden on the military than it would actually be a help.
To argument one, you would still create a gaps argument with this as well. Even if you sent men off, you would end up with less men, which means that unless you suddenly become a Christian polygamist, you're still going to have less men than are required to impregnate the women. And I'm guessing you want one woman per one man. So even sending men off to die, you're still going to have this problem, right?
Well, technically not.
Technically not what?
Well, like if you were to think of, I'm not necessarily advocating for this, but if you had a situation where you had a severely declined population in a nation and you had to increase the numbers, you could increase the numbers via like in vitro fertilization. You could do other types of, and there were people who used to do polygamy.
Wouldn't God not vibe with that?
First,
right.
In vitro fertilization.
I do believe in vitro fertilization.
In vitro fertilization is highly expensive. If you look at Israel has a massive IVF program. It costs their state millions upon millions upon millions, mostly our dollars yearly, and it's not very effective. It's hang on, I'm almost done. It's only raised it slightly. You still would end up with this gaps argument. If you're a Christian, you believe one man for one woman, you would still be decreasing the population of men, which means that unless you switch over to polygamy, you have this. The argument actually turns on you. If women out there were dying at the same ratio that men were, right? And then you would have exactly the amount of men and women that you would need to repopulate, right?
But then, well, not necessarily. I mean, you could technically.
Well, I don't know. I know math.
I'm
mathing it in my brain right now.
If you had a dying population on an island, okay, and you had 10 women and 10 men, if you were to try to send your people off to go, fight a group of people, you would be smart to preserve as many women as you could, because you'd be able to duplicate your numbers. As long as you had a couple men, you could duplicate the population.
Yes, but then you would be endorsing polygamy, right?
Right, and there were times when people
did but that's not within the Christian ethic, is it? Polygamy.
Well, some Christians, I guess.
So are they the same ones that have female pastors?
Well, no, it's actually
those Christians.
No, that's actually a fact, though, that there were Christian groups that resorted to polygamy to boost their numbers.
Yes, but anyway, and it's immoral, though, from the Christian ethic, right?
And
do agree with that, right?
We're talking about, we're putting on our logical nation hat right now as far as what a nation should do for a military. I'm not talking about it from necessarily a Christian standpoint.
Yeah, but that was your argument.
But no, that's not what I said. Now,
yes, it was what you said.
Here's the other thing. There's another argument here for it, which is women should have their own sports, right? Because if men compete in women's sports, we all know that the men are going to win because they're stronger, they're faster, the way they're built anatomically, they are, they're stronger, they're faster. So there's no real point to putting a female in a combat situation with men when we know the woman's most likely going to lose. What if they're all just in
support roles?
Well, support roles is another thing.
So they should be drafted for support roles.
Well, if it were just something like support roles, as in being a nurse or something like phone communication lines,
most
then
roles
I would be
in the
okay
military
with
are
that.
not combat roles.
Well, if it's non-combat roles, I would say that then I would agree that women could be conscripted. But I would say that if there are mothers,
that earlier you said it goes against God's ontological nature that He made women with.
Nope,
yes, you did.
I didn't say God.
You did. You said their nature. Their nature for the draft is part of. Yes, you did.
No, I said because women menstruate, because women carry pregnancies, because women's bodies are weaker. I was talking about that being why women shouldn't be in the military, and I think that it would be more of a burden to have them in and you're pointing out that, okay, well, maybe we have them in non-combat roles. And I would say, well, if they were limited to having the women in non-combat roles, then I would say, okay, but we clearly see that that's not the case. We see that there are women who are being forced to be in combat roles. But if they limited it to only non-combat roles, then I would say, okay, that might be something that I could be in agreement with, as long as the women are not mothers that have to tend to children.
Okay, so backing up on the basis of argument one, which is, well, if we send the men off to war and a bunch of them die, we can just do polygamy. Yeah, I mean, I guess, but that would be against your Christian ethics.
I'm not necessarily saying that that's...
I get it. So that one's rejected, right? Obviously, you don't believe that shit, right? That would be bad.
What I'm saying is, if you had people, a society that the population was seriously hurt because look, what happened in World War II? You had hundreds of millions of people being killed.
And they solved that with age gap relationships.
Right, and how much harder would it have been to recuperate our population numbers if half of those were women? It probably would have taken a lot longer to recuperate our population.
You would have exactly the amount of men to women. No, that's why it makes no sense, right? The argument falls back on you either way. So either A, women and men go out and they have roughly the same losses, so there's just as many men as there are women, or B, men go out and a bunch of them die, and now you have less men than are necessary for a polygamous relationship with women. You can't have your cake and eat it too here.
Well, here's the thing. If you're talking about having the women in non-combat roles anyway, then the women aren't going to be being put in the position of dying.
Yeah, but we weren't talking about that originally.
Yeah,
them in
and that's what I'm saying.
roles.
One of my arguments was population numbers, but what I'm saying is what your argument was, okay, well, what if the women are in the non-combat roles?
Right.
Well, therefore, it wouldn't be affecting population numbers because the women are not going to be in direct combat. They're not going to be in combat. Their lives are not likely to be being taken from them. So at that point, it's less likely to run into the very problem that I was talking about.
Now let's move into non-combat roles. Wouldn't it still be effective even in the non-combat roles to have men serve in those roles than women, since a lot of them require a lot of physical labor?
Well, I think that it's possible for some women to be able to fulfill that role, but yes. I think that the outliers, right? Like the 6 foot tall big girls that can do that.
Yeah, all 26 of them. Yeah.
You know, right? But I think that as a whole, most women are not going to be suited for like combat
military
roles.
service at all, right?
Well, I would say
so why
especially
should we,
combat
if they can't
roles.
defend the nation, then they can't.
I'm not saying military service at all. I agreed with you.
If they can't defend our nation as a whole,
roles.
and you're depending on men then to defend your nation for you and go out and die, that's why I think they should be able to vote, and you shouldn't.
Okay, well, you just acknowledged that women could perform non-combat roles. So
as long as men let them.
Your own argument.
No, I didn't. Defeat my own argument. Defeated yours 3 times. Here,
you just
let's go through it.
Your own argument
we'll
earlier.
Go all 3 times. There's no contradiction.
You're literally contradicting.
There's no contradiction. I was granting your argument for the purpose of destroying it. I showed you, yes, even if we added them as non-combatants, gave you that argument to save you from you.
If this were
even
Tron,
if
you
we
would
were
have
to,
already a million times.
Even if we were to grant your argument,
contradicting himself.
What's the contradiction?
The contradiction was you just said. You literally said that women can do non-combat
No, I
roles.
said, what if we move them into those roles?
Okay, because you know they're capable.
No.
You wouldn't have even have suggested that. If you
That's why we clarified immediately after by saying, wouldn't men be better in those roles? And you were like, yeah, they would, Andrew. They would be better in those roles. And I was like, yeah, see, I grant everyone's argument for the purpose of destroying it twice.
No, you're contradicting
There's no contradiction.
yourself.
Point it out.
Okay, the contradiction was you suggested that women can fulfill non-combat roles.
I granted your argument, yes.
No, that was your argument. You presented that.
I said, what if we move them into non-com roles?
You presented that. Rewind. Everyone can rewind.
I said, what if we move them into non-com roles? You said, yeah, we could do that. So then I said, but even if we did, wouldn't men be better in that role? You said, yes, absolutely. And I went, well, then that's really not a viable argument either.
Would they be better in the role in a non-combat role?
Yes.
They would be better in a non-combat role.
So then, if we want the most effective military, we want it to be men. Therefore, men are the enforcers. And even if we did move women, all women into non-combat roles, they still would not be going out and doing the killing and the dying. So therefore, they still should get the big piece of chicken, the extra piece of meat, and the voting rights.
Okay, here's the question. Is sitting there behind a desk operating a drone a non-combat role?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how it's classified.
It is a non-combat role because when you are...
Is it? Is it classified as a non-combat role? I'm not sure.
You're sitting... It's not hand-to-hand combat, okay?
So?
It's not physical combat.
So what? That doesn't mean
sit
it's
behind a desk
so what?
and you can operate
Being in a
drone.
tank's not hand-to-hand combat either.
That's sitting
Is that
behind
a
desk.
non-combat role? You're in a tank. What about an F-16? That's not hand-to-hand.
Well, there aren't that many women pilots. It does take a lot of physical impact on your body to be a pilot.
Right. So
Because
the
you
best
have to
pilots are going to be
withstand
men.
G-force.
The best tankers are going to be men. The best non-combatants are going to be men, and the best combatants are going to be men. We
Well-
want the most powerful military. We know that men are going to enforce your rights. Therefore, men get to vote because they have more stake in the game, and you don't.
Who had the men that are being sent off to die?
God.
I'm just
Men
saying.
could have you whether you wanted them to have you or not. That's the point of enforcement. The point of enforcement is, regardless of what women want, whatever they claim, where they claim, oh no, we're equal, we're ontologically equal, we're physically equal, we have the same knowledge bases, we have all, men can just take what they want. Collectively, if men say tomorrow, you have no rights, you don't
Okay,
have
so,
any.
So you're going back to thinking women shouldn't have the right to vote.
I'm saying to you that due to enforcement, if men say collectively tomorrow, you have no rights, you don't have any. Would you like me to point out country after country where this is true?
It's horrible.
But I thought they were inherent from God.
They are.
Oh, they should be.
But the
is what
reason
you meant to
people
say.
people choose to do bad things.
The only
People-
reason
in the
why
world.
men
So
are
but I
choose
thought
to-
that it was inherent.
People choose to break from God's will all the time. It's called sin. It's
Okay.
because He gave us free will.
So
Renee,
God
what were
gave
you going to say?
God gave you rights, and you just ignore them.
I was going to ask him. All men are enforcers because of the historical trend of men being in power.
No,
but,
it's because they can literally stomp you to death, and there's nothing you can do
okay,
about it. That's
true.
why.
They're
Do you
physically
give your
stronger.
wife any
But
say
if
in
we-
decisions
if
in your
we lived-
household?
If we
Sometimes.
lived in a
Sometimes.
female
Okay, so your wife
government-
has the same.
I know you
hold
think
on.
that's impossible, but if I can pose that hypothetical that we
Right.
live in an all-female government where the women are the ones who enforce the rights, is that
Women can't enforce the rights; they would still rely on men to enforce the rights.
okay? Let's
So I'll explain it.
physically, yes.
I'll hang on.
The
Let me-
woman could be a
I'm trying
queen,
to explain
and then
it
the
to
man
you.
can
No,
enforce the rights.
nope.
But why can a woman not vote in that
I'm going to
scenario?
explain it to you so
Go
that
ahead.
you know.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's say you had a 100% powerhouse government of all women. They're all She-Ra bitches in tight leather who do ninja kicks in men's faces.
Problematic,
They
okay.
are the action movie stars that you have seen. They are the Black Widows, okay? Still wouldn't matter because ultimately the enforcement of the population, if it collectively said, nope, they're gone. And there's nothing they can do about it, but in reverse, it's not true. If men collectively say to women, we're in charge and you're not, you can do shit. That's the distinction.
But
whether or not you're in charge is always going to be based on men allowing you to be in charge because collectively they can take that away. Women could not collectively take it away from them.
So your whole argument is men should be able to vote and women no because men are physically stronger. And men can physically overpower them. And that's the definition
no.
of rights.
No, his argument
No.
is that the reason they should have the right to vote is because they have the inherent
Burden
burden having
of
to protect
defending
the
you.
The burden is being physically stronger.
No,
Not just physically
yes, it is, because if we
stronger.
were physically stronger, then all of this would be reversed.
But you're not.
Yeah. But,
So who cares?
Well, you were
but
just
who's to
telling-
say that's not just an anatomical argument? That doesn't have any
Wait a second. Let's
valiancy.
assume for a second that it is just an anatomical argument.